want you all to remember that you like me. In the words of fifth generation farmer, homesteader, and practical skills teacher Megan Austin, as she ponders aloud, who would have guessed that if you mix heavy metals, microplastics, pesticides, antibiotic-laced meats, synthetic fertilizers, glyphosate, fluoride, industrial seed oils, GMOs, artificial sweeteners, processed foods, synthetic fragrances, and Teflon, then people get sick. Yet doing so is so normalized in our world. William Faulkner once wrote that all of us labor in webs spun long before we were born. This is true. Yet it is also true, especially in our modern world, perhaps more than any other time in recorded history, the webs being spun, the ones impacting us most detrimentally, are of our own making. We have countless collective unconscious agreements to which we abide in our daily lives because they create a sense of ease to such degrees that we conveniently disregard the consequences of our actions. We've been lulled through industrial and technological advances that have created lives of convenience, that we now have something akin to collective amnesia, if ever we were even conscious of it at all. And for our younger generations, it may be safe to assume that they are not aware entirely, for we shelter the young as we should. Though perhaps more accurately, we artfully only tell parts of the story so as to create a palatable context. This message is, it's not about judging, for I am as complicit as the next person in almost all of the scenarios I present today. Their existence creating such creature comforts that giving them a second thought rarely crosses my mind, except only a few. And why would it? As a culture, we are programmed not to think about the consequences of our actions. We've found ways to distribute responsibility so that no single person feels accountable, yet outcomes are systemic. And the proliferation of such is staggering, as seen if only we take a slight step back and look. If we consent to the use of plastics in our everyday lives, such as convenience items, bags, bottles, packaging, pens, binders, spatulas, then we are harming marine life, polluting ecosystems, and harming ourselves and all Earth's residents with microplastics that enter our bodies. If we build structures and systems for the sake of convenience and in the name of progress without regard for those harmed, then we are complicit in the harm. There are many things that humans do that either needlessly cost human lives or inadvertently cause harm to nature, usually consistently both. For instance, when humans desire to have a bridge built, as part of the project planning, there is a forecasted number of casualties anticipated. I first became aware of this in the early 1990s when what would become the Confederation Bridge connecting Prince Edward Island, Canada, to the New Brunswick mainland. It was being planned, and I was living on the island at that time. It's an 8-mile bridge. It was forecasted in the comprehensive planning notes that there would likely be 13 deaths for such an endeavor relating to human error and equipment malfunctions in the construction of this truly architectural phenomenon. It was deemed an acceptable loss those 13 lives projected. In the end, once it was completed, only 9 people died. This was considered a favorable outcome. The often unspoken agreement is that death tolls are understood to be an acceptable cost to progress, an acceptable cost to making everyone else's life easier. During the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel build, 7 workers died. Boston's Big Dig, the Central Artery Tunnel project, 4 workers died, plus a woman in her vehicle who was killed when 12 tons of concrete ceiling panels collapsed onto her car in a connector tunnel. These are far less fatalities than previous generations would have and did experience. All of the great feats of humankind came at a huge cost. The NIH cites that bridge and tunnel workers who work round the clock, long hours, and long weeks have high mortality rate, and they are treated more often in hospitals than any other construction workers. En masse, in our modern world, these are acceptable consequences. Consequences we rarely think about until they directly impact us, until it is our loved one who has become the statistic. Until then, we mostly carry on with our lives, barely even grateful for the convenience of the bridges and tunnels, let alone the tragic costs of them. So much of our lives are lived unaware of how even the slightest things we do have impact. If we cultivate a culture of habitual food waste, then a large portion of produced food is discarded, wasting water, energy, and labor while simultaneously contributing to methane emissions in landfills. If light pollution goes unchecked, then artificial lighting disrupts ecosystems by disorienting migratory birds, insects, and sea turtles, and also affects human circadian rhythms and our health. If we rake leaves from our lawns too early in the spring, before temperatures are above 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 10 degrees Celsius consistently for a week, then we risk harming beneficial pollinators such as bees and butterfly larvae, which are hibernating in that leaf litter. Humans love to collect things from nature, don't we? Yet, even when doing so in seemingly benevolent modes of being, the choices negatively impact the environment and Earth's creatures. For example, humans love to collect seashells from the beaches to make art and jewelry, or for our altars, or for memory's sake. The ramification from this habit is that our ocean's creatures, such as hermit crabs, no longer have access to new homes because of the vast reduction of seashells in their habitats. Sculptor and interdisciplinary artist Elizabeth Desmarais, in her article entitled The Hand Up Project, Attempting to Meet the New Needs of Natural Life Forms, she cites that 30% of all hermit crabs on our shorelines are living in shells that are too small for them. In springtime, when the animals have their growth spurts, this shortage skyrockets to 60%. Elizabeth has fabricated alternative forms of housing for the hermit crabs from artificial materials, which of course could have their own unintended circumstances and consequences, as they are made of plastics. Yet the reality is that already these sea creatures are using human trash, often plastics, littering the ocean floor as makeshift homes in lieu of access to natural shells. Over 500,000 hermit crabs have died in recent years after becoming trapped in trash, such as plastic and glass bottles, seeking new homes and instead entering prisons they could not escape from. Harvesting and selling seashells is a worldwide industry. Collecting shells is also a spiritual practice for many of us. Whether it is for financial gain or seemingly benign purposes, the impact is real and measurable on the hermit crab and its ecosystem. If we continue to harvest the shells, then we are contributing to the demise of this precious ecosystem. Hermit crabs aren't the only ones being displaced from potential homes. Humans are rapidly, ubiquitously, comprehensively. The conversion of houses into tourist commodities via platforms like Vrbo and Airbnb, which began as a home sharing platform circa 2008. Within 18 months of Airbnb beginning, 1 million nights were booked, rapidly increasing to 10 million. The acceleration continued. Its primary competitor, Vrbo, which was created more than a decade earlier in 1995, renting private residences instead of just spaces in rooms, experienced massive growth as well. Competition expanding Airbnb's model to include whole homes as well as continuing the shared space model it popularized. By 2019, Airbnb boasted more listings than the top 5 hotel brands combined, shifting from a niche couch surfing alternative to a preferred accommodation choice. While there was a slight decline during the onset of COVID, user numbers soon began to rise again. Vacation rentals surged on Vrbo as the travelers preferred secluded homes, reaching 18 million homes in 2024. The impact? Short-term rentals not only reduce long-term rental supply, those purchasing houses for the purpose of short-term rentals reduce inventory for potential home buyers. This business model increases housing prices and disproportionately reduces affordable housing supply. Because we participate in a system we didn't design, societal losses are normalized because they are diffuse, initially at least, even invisible while we are interacting with the product, that comfortable vacation home we casually rent rather than a hotel room or bed and breakfast, even as we justify the increasing cost benefit of it. It's true, it used to be quite a bit less expensive to rent a whole house than every person renting an individual room by themselves in a hotel. That's changing. Yet because the convenience of these tourist commodities are embedded in our culture, we are complicit in the collective agreement of acceptable losses, namely housing scarcity, which is distributed onto the vulnerable. The results? Essential workers are priced out. There is loss of community cohesion, commutes lengthen, workforce destabilizes, local economies become fragile. There's a loss of belonging, less social cohesion, and reduced civic participation. This all occurs if we participate in using houses as tourist commodities, either as business owners or vacation renters. And in this, I am complicit. It is more affordable for me when traveling, and certainly, typically, more comfortable for my family and friends when we travel together. Yet the impact of this inequitable development to gentrification, social displacement, class disparity, and cultural loss are enormous. If we continue urban sprawl, then expanding cities consume forests, wetlands, and farmlands, fragment wildlife habitats, increase car dependency, and contribute to pollution and climate change. If we perpetuate excessive non-organic pesticide use, Then chemicals designed to protect crops kill beneficial insects like bees, contaminate soil and water, and can harm farm workers and nearby communities. Fast fashion. The fashion industry produces annually 2.1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases, with carbon emissions projected to rise over 60% by 2030. Clothing, something most of us see as harmless, is a top-tier climate driver. Around 100 billion garments are produced annually. 30% are never even sold. 92 million tons of textile waste are generated each year. 11.3 million tons of textile waste go into landfills annually in the US alone. The average American throws away 81 pounds of clothing per year. Globally, 87% of clothing ends up in landfills or incinerators, while experts estimate that 95% of this discarded clothing could be reused or recycled. Only 1% is recycled into new clothing. And that new clothing, it doesn't work for capitalism if they donate it. The clothing industry uses 93 billion cubic meters of water per year. It accounts for 20% of global wastewater from fabric coloring, color dyeing, and treatment. And then there's the toxic chemicals. Lead, arsenic, mercury, into rivers they go, affecting ecosystems and human populations. Entire communities, typically in lower income counties and countries, drink and farm with contaminated water as a result. If we continue to waste water, there will be droughts because of water stress. Local water stress. AI infrastructure is becoming a measurable contributor to water stress, which when combined with climate change can increase drought-related mortality by hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of people over the coming decades. Interesting side note about this almost statistic is no one online that I could find would give anything close to an actual estimate. They know people are going to die from drought. It's very likely going to be in the millions, but no one yet that I have found has stated what that projection would be. Because when you're going to build something like the bridge I talked about earlier, somewhere in the notes is that line item so that people will know the cost. Data centers use water primarily for cooling. Data centers consume millions of gallons of water per day. They compete with municipal drinking water, agriculture, ecosystems. AI-related droughts are inevitable. With droughts come famines. With famines come starvation, disease, and death. In 1865, British economist William Stanley Jevons introduced what became known as the Jevons paradox or Jevons effect, describing what occurs when increased technological efficiency in utilizing a resource leads to higher rather than lower total consumption. As efficiency makes resource use cheaper, demands increase, often canceling out energy savings. This phenomenon is driven by rebound effects, that is to say, the reduction in expected gains from new technologies or policies, often caused by behavioral or systemic responses. This applies to modern technology, AI, and even environmental policy. We no longer have occasional AI use. A few months ago, I discoursed at length about the singularity that's coming. We have instilled into the fabric of our culture ambient, constant AI use everywhere. It is what we rely on for our healthcare and financial decisions and record keeping. We turn to AI for our mundane and major information gathering and education tools. And once a technology is introduced to us in a tolerable way, we begin to interact with it effortlessly. AI is so normalized, we hardly recognize when and how much we are using it. When I share this in PDF form with Beth to place online, there's dozens, I think over 40 different ways we interact with AI without even realizing it. Some include speaking into Siri and Alexa, typing into Google search, AI silently sorting our junk versus important messages. I appreciate that, but I didn't consider the cost. YouTube suggesting our next video, Spotify curating our playlists and podcasts. These are all AI generated. Amazon suggesting items based on browsing. Smartwatches tracking heart rate, sleep, and activity patterns. And news curation. Algorithms deciding which news stories you see. Which is a whole other topic, because when we see our news, we don't understand why our neighbors do or vote the way they vote. AI is impacting all of that. The average person interacts with AI dozens to hundreds of times per day, often without awareness. Many of these systems shape choices, what to buy, watch, and believe, not just how to respond to them. With AI, like fast fashion, the user experiences it feels frictionless, fluid, even natural. The costs are externalized to water systems, to energy grids, to mining regions, eventually to us. But by then, we are captured in the double bind created by unconscious infiltration to habitual use. We trade in the claimed benefit of productivity, economic growth, convenience to the very real costs of water stress, pollution, extraction, and a stripping away of the human experience, global benefit, localized burden, societal detriment. What connects these if-then themes is this: chronic, low visibility harm, not immediate, not initially dramatic, but cumulative. These are not isolated issues. They are examples of a broader structure. Modern systems often trade long-term human and ecological health and wellness for short-term efficiency, profit, or convenience, while normalizing the losses. One more thing I will add to this category of normalizing losses, because humans have unconsciously or perhaps consciously agreed to a particular acceptable loss that results in 40,000 deaths annually on average in the United States. 40,000 deaths annually, most of which are preventable. More than 90% of fatalities would be completely eliminated if the maximum speed limit was no more than 25 miles per hour. And all automobiles, except for emergency vehicles, would have governors to prevent them from being able to break the speed limit. Now, it's right about here that I completely lose certainly my 18-year-old son's willingness to have a rational discussion about what he calls, while rolling his eyes, mom's hypothesis 25 mph. He says it's completely unrealistic to expect humans to modify the way we live in our fast-paced world. And he continues by saying, seriously, who would buy a Corvette or Lamborghini that maxed out at 25 miles per hour? Mom, not everyone wants to live in a golf cart lifestyle like you. And it's true, I would love to live in a golf cart lifestyle. But I see his perspective. And I receive pushback from most of my friends and colleagues of all ages about this idea of reducing the maximum speed limit to 25 miles per hour. I'm reminded that higher speeds enhance efficiency by optimizing traffic flow, reducing congestion, and aligning with the design capability of the infrastructure. Clearly, when they're reminding me of this, they're having amnesia about their daily commutes on I-5 in Southern California or I-95 here on any of the major cities in the East Coast of the United States, which often take the shape of a parking lot during rush hour due to the inevitable disruptions of optimized traffic flow due to high-speed accidents, often resulting in severe injury and fatalities. Injuries and fatalities, we have collectively agreed, are tolerable damages and acceptable losses. Yet it is not just the highways and freeways where such fatalities occur. In 1994, on a quiet country road in Maine, my brother Charlie died while on a motorcycle. Best we can tell that there was a car coming up on him, going at a high speed, and it caused him to go off the road and accelerate as he did into a utility pole. In 2008, on a road in New Brunswick, Canada, while driving home to Maine and passing by an intersection, my mother's car was crashed into by a man going approximately 60 miles per hour. He failed to see the flashing red light and stop sign and drove right into her vehicle, and my mother died as a result of that crash. In a world of convenience and fast-paced transportation goals, statistically, these are acceptable losses. Not in my heart and mind. Elevating it to slightly more than a statistic, 40,000, and sometimes this number goes up to 44,000. 40,000 is roughly the equivalent to all the residents of Waterville, Winslow, Fairfield, Oakland, Belgrade, and Sydney. If it was enacted into law that in order to be able to drive above 25 miles per hour, then in something akin to a Hunger Games lottery style reaping ceremony where we didn't know who would be selected, but it was guaranteed that 6 towns worth of people would be killed in every year. I think our attitudes might shift about the worth of a fast-paced society versus the value of slowing it down. For it might not be written explicitly into our laws, yet it is our unspoken covenant in exchange for the privilege of driving fast. Rationalizing such consequences, be it fatalities from high-speed motor vehicles, death tolls from construction, bridges and tunnels, displacement and homelessness caused by the removal of seashells for hermit crabs or houses for humans to live in, to the consequences of AI sprawl. I don't know if that's actually a word yet, but it certainly feels appropriate. AI sprawl. Rationalizing occurs often as a result of the theory of utility, something also posited by William Jevons. The concept was said to be first introduced by Swiss mathematician and physicist Daniel Bernoulli, whose early concept, circa 1738, suggested people act to maximize benefit. This economic concept states that individuals make rational decisions to maximize their satisfaction. Yet utility theory assumes consumers can rank preferences, meaning they can always decide if they prefer one bundle of goods over another. When so many of the consequences, intended or otherwise, are kept hidden or off limits in public discourse, informed consent is impossible. And when informed consent leads to radical changes, scales of power are disrupted. Because of this, to all extents possible, consequences are downplayed, and a sense of resignation is encouraged. We are all to blame. Collective guilt, all absolved. Philosopher Peter Singer's 1971 essay entitled Famine, Affluence, and Morality argues that individuals have a moral obligation to prevent suffering if they can do so without sacrificing anything of comparable significance. In our thought for contemplation today, he says, if it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. The reduction of suffering is a moral obligation, whether it is in terms of addressing the housing crisis, environmental crisis, infrastructure and architectural planning systems, manufacturing norms, choosing as a society to eliminate the toxic chemicals entirely, and consciously grasping the infiltration of AI. Or in terms of creating new agreements that eradicate preventable deaths, even when doing so may be a huge inconvenience, even when doing so may prompt the need to utterly shift our lifestyles. I believe it is our moral obligation to at least name these things, then talk about them, even when our complicity makes it challenging, and especially when we are benefiting from systemic systems. If we do talk about them, then hopefully together we can discover and implement lasting solutions and create new agreements that hold all life sacred. Thank you for your extended time today. Amen. If we include a form of meditation or Tai Chi in our daily practices, then our anxiety levels are automatically reduced, and we are more likely to meet stress with ease and have an optimistic outlook on life. If we sit for less than 3 hours a day, then studies show we increase our lifespan by about 2 years. If we leave our homes or Zoom in on Sunday mornings and come to this church, then we'll be greeted with friendly faces, loving support, and a community where we can trust that we truly belong. May that always be so.